Welcome to Ceiling Shattering Tactics. We are here to elevate, innovate, and disrupt executive leadership by digging into the tactics and tools that have helped transformative entrepreneurs and leaders get to where they are today. Joining us is Lori Sussle Bonanni. Lori, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So the reason that you are here is because you are the founder of Elssus, LLC, a multidisciplined communication consulting firm that builds and grows companies' reputations by increasing awareness, business results, and credibility. And I love it because credibility is so important. And we all want to know, what is your ceiling shattering tactic?
Well, boosting creativity through a maker and manager schedule is my ceiling shattering tactic.
I so want to talk with you about this because it is such a hard thing, especially when you're juggling so many projects and as an entrepreneur, to find that space to be creative. So what is a maker manager schedule?
So maker manager schedule was coined by Paul Graham, who is the founder of Y Combinator. And basically, a manager's schedule is meetings. And a maker's schedule is getting stuff done. And so someone on the maker's schedule, meetings can blow an entire afternoon, right? Mm-hmm. And if you're breaking things up, it's just too hard to stay in focus. And so meetings, basically breaking it up for a maker schedule would have less meetings and a manager schedule would have most. So I have noticed, before I noticed what this was actually called, I was kind of doing this anyway. So I would bucket meetings, or I know I don't typically take meetings on a certain day. And so I realized I was getting things done in this focused time. So I do a lot of writing. So I can't write in 10-minute batches.
No.
And so blocking my days and being able to do that really helped. So I knew that if I chunked meetings in one part of I'm pretty sure that Paul means it as blocking a day. So a day is a maker, a day is a manager kind of thing. I've done it sort of in half days. So I might have Wednesday morning meetings or Thursday afternoon meetings, and then leaving a big chunk of time to be able to, get my work done. But I think also during COVID, it sort of threw a wrench into it because, pre-COVID, you could have in-person meetings or phone calls, and everybody wants to be on video. So when you're on video and then you have to get your work done, it just leads more to that Zoom fatigue. So thinking about
training,
how to be creative. I can't be creative just sitting at my computer all day. So, and that's a big part of what I do and why this schedule is really important to have that thinking time.
Yeah. And I'm curious because I've been trying to manage my schedule in all different ways. And I think that especially for entrepreneurs or people who have their own business or consulting firm, your schedule is actually incredibly chaotic because you're kind of, you have to make sure you're not the bottleneck. You have to make sure that you're making time available for your clients when they're available. And so it's not necessarily easy to be oh, well, Mondays, I'm not going to take any meetings. And I only do my meetings on Tuesday afternoon. I aim to get to that place. But how do you put that framework in place and really stick to it?
Well, let's be honest. I still aim to get to that place too. But I try and I offer a lot of flexibility for my clients. So in terms of that, or sometimes I'll ask them to share what they're most available and then work my schedule around that. So if I know that they're only available on Tuesday mornings, I might do Tuesday mornings as my chunk of meetings. And really being flexible, right? I am not somebody that follows this rigid schedule. And there's always going to be flukes, and there's always days that, I'll have an 11 o'clock meeting and a 1 o'clock meeting and a 3 o'clock meeting. So those little time chunks, I have to find something that doesn't require a ton of focus to get done, or a long, lengthy time of focus. So it's something what can you bang out quickly? And then you're getting that productivity in there. It's just not that focused piece. Cause we talked about this a little bit before, I can't write in 10-minute blocks.
And it's just, it's so hard. You sit down, you get your coffee, your water, you're all set up. You sit down, you start to write. And then all of a sudden you're well, my time is up. And then you've got like maybe a jumbled sentence put together. But so everyone is different, especially creative. Some people are morning people, night people, what do you find? When do you find that you're the most creative? So when do you try and put your blocks in place for your creative time and your manager time, and why?
I feel that I am really good like in afternoon. Like I am definitely a night person anyway, so I can sometimes do writing when everybody's gone to bed, which is obviously not an ideal place to be, but I think that in the afternoon, which has caused some of this because my daughter comes home from school, either me or my husband pick her up, and like by 5:30 she's home, 5:45 maybe, and I feel like I'm like might be getting into my like let me bang out work at like 2:30, and so like I'm on a roll, and then it's like and there was my 3-hour chunk. So I would love to make my 3-hour chunk like 9 to 12 in the morning, and so it's not like racing. But I also think, and especially in the roles that I've had, and the role I do have, deadlines are everything. And I think I'm somebody that like loves to run up against deadlines, like, or if there's like a client deadline on a Thursday, I'll give myself a deadline of Tuesday. And so I know I have that window, but I'm running against my own personal deadline. And so I think that is what maybe ties into like they're coming home and I'm not done, or something like that it feels like there's your deadline.
My boss is coming home. She's going to be so angry if I'm not done with this.
Which is why I mean, I've always built in bonus deadlines anyway. Like thought deadlines. And so I've always done that in my career so that it's not, really to the wire. And so I think that's something that I've been thinking about. Like, why is it that it's like that late afternoon chunk is when it feels, so I do a lot of my meetings in the morning because I feel like it just it just works for me. And of course there's always exceptions. Like I have a 3:30 meeting today. So, so I think that that's something in terms of like owning your schedule. One of the things I've really tried to do is to end calls by 4:00. Just to have like a little bit of a window of like, not scrambling to like clean my office up, before I go into mom zone. And I'll tell you, I usually fail miserably at that, but that is definitely an aspiration to be able to break up my day, almost like my own little maker manager schedule that I can, have this like turn off from work zone to mom zone. And it usually just flies together, which is what we were talking about earlier.
It's my 2022 goal. Like it's going to happen this year. And so just, can you tell me about like one time that you realized or how this has really been transformative in how you deal with your clients and how it's helped your career? Like how have you felt this really be a tactic that you're like, this is it, I need to stick to this?
I think in my career in corporate, I was always being added to meetings. I never controlled my schedule ever.
That tool in Microsoft and like Outlook is the worst tool ever created. I'm just kidding. I mean, I'm kind of kidding, but I'm not. Because you're like, how do I get added? My schedule is I've got to block the whole day out so that no one's
and I have to say, so when I worked in corporate, and I sometimes still do this, but I used to leave a Post-it note on my laptop before I left for the day, whatever time that would be, especially when I worked in advertising, it would be whenever, I'd put a Post-it and I put the top 3 to 5 things that had to get accomplished for the next day. And I will tell you 9.5 times out of 10, something happened in the overnight hours that list no longer mattered. And I think that having that flexibility to shift to like what's urgent, what's important has kind of set me up well to be an entrepreneur because every day is different. And I love that. And so while I strive for these like calendars and being able to boost creativity, I know that I can be creative with a chunk of time, right? I can't be super creative in 10 minutes, but if I have that chunk of time set, it doesn't really matter if it's in the morning or in the afternoon. I just know when it would work for me. So these are 2022 goals, right? But I think being able to have that idea of like, okay, well, I don't need a 10 o'clock, a 12 o'clock, and a 2 o'clock meeting. Like it could be a 10, 11, and a 12. And I can control that much more than I could when meetings would just get thrown on your computer, or, on your calendar.
That's amazing. I love it. Well, I can't wait to really try. I mean, I've tried to do this without knowing that there was a maker manager schedule. So now I'm implementing these tactics myself. But before I let you go, I want to turn it over to Anne, who has our Dear Future Disruptor segment.
Hi, Lori. Thank you so much for sharing your tactic. I know it works well for entrepreneurs, but I think that as for students, it can work potentially well also, because I find that like when I have lectures and meetings like scattered throughout the entire day, I like tend to lose momentum really quick. And like after the first meeting, I'm like, oh no, I have a meeting like later in the day, and like I just like don't have that need to be like productive. And so I think in the new year, I'll definitely try to implement your make and manage schedule as well.
Fantastic.
And so I just have two quick questions I'm going to ask you, and you can feel free to answer them as in depth as you'd like. So the first question is, what's one decision you made that's changed the trajectory of your life?
Oh, I love it. It's two decisions, but they're tied together. So when I was in college, I really wanted to study abroad. And for financial reasons, I couldn't do it because if the way my major was set up, if I missed a semester, I would basically miss a whole year. It was all kind of in order. And so that was kind of a big bummer. And so when I graduated and everybody was looking for jobs, I was looking for ways to secure a work visa to move abroad. And I'll date myself, but like I had been to Mexico and the Caribbean, but I didn't need a passport for those things back then. So I secured myself a passport, and I took a chance and moved to London and found myself, a work visa, and through a program called BUNAC, which still exists. And in the beginning, I had never lived in a big city, and I was like, oh, this is great. Like, I know my roommates are, working, but like I could go to like museums and whatever. And that was great for the first month that I was there. And then when rent was due and I went to the ATM, I realized I didn't have money for rent. And so I remember we were going to a pub, you're 5 hours ahead. I remember calling home to my dad, and I was like, so yeah, I've been really cultured and doing really fun things, but I have to pay rent tomorrow and I don't have any money. And so my dad was obviously delighted. And he said, I will, put money in your account, but if you need this again, you're on your own. And so, because this is really, I kind of had to fight to go abroad, right? My parents were like, well, everybody gets a job. Like I was the first person to graduate from a 4-year university in my family. So like the fact that I had this degree and now I'm like, yeah, I'm just going to go abroad. And so long story short, I went to BUNAC, and they had a big room, and they had like Post-it notes with potential jobs, and you could go and like take like, a little paper with the phone number. And this was a long time ago. And I found myself a job at a publishing firm, and it was awesome. And I worked there for the duration of my visa. And so when I came back and I was looking for work, I wound up getting my first job with a company that was based in the UK, really big and established. And they were actually establishing their New York office. Their first day in New York was my first day. And so it was a really nice reminder of where I had just come from. And I'm pretty sure being there and being immersed in that certainly helped, because the office in New York had 4 people and 2 of them were from the UK. So I think that was something that kind of set me up for that path. The other thing that's related is when I was at NBC many years later, I was really getting this itch to travel again in more than 2 weeks. And so I left. My boyfriend at the time, now my husband, was not interested in just quitting a job and going backpacking. And so I was like, well, going to go. And when I left, I was really intrigued by freelancing. And so I had set up a couple of things when I came back so that I was still paying rent in a New York City apartment. So I had some sort of income for that. But being able to take that sabbatical and come back, I was supposed to be temporary. I was going to freelance on my return, and then be able to look for a full-time job, because I figured that's what you do. And I love freelancing so much that I actually kind of gave up on a job search. I just stopped. And so about a year and a half in, I was like, oh, maybe it's time to look for a job. Because at this point I could have had a full-time job. And I ultimately did. We relocated to Atlanta briefly, and I found a job there. But when I was laid off from that job about 15 months in, it really was like, you know what, I want to go back to freelance. So I think those two stories really represent things that made my path not a straight line.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. I found it interesting that your path was different from others and you decided to take your own risks, and then you came out with unique experiences that really helped you as an entrepreneur later. So yes. I found that really interesting.
Yes.
And my second question is, what are some resources you would suggest for new leaders?
Ooh, I love that. I love finding, I know people, it's controversial, but I love finding thought leaders on Twitter. I think thought leadership can come from anywhere. I think using hashtags to find what you're interested in. I think finding a mentor or mentors is crucial. And I think that just being a voracious reader and being able to just take it in, and whether it's, leadership books or articles, I think just being able to just consume content from anywhere, being able to learn from others is really key.
Yeah, I definitely think that's so important. So that's all I have for you. Thank you so much, Lori.
Oh, you're welcome.
So, Anne, thank you so much for those questions. And Lori, before we let you go and continue with your transformative work, what is one thing we can share with our community that you're doing and you're excited about?
I'm working with a lot of exciting technology companies, and there's just such movement in the space. And, I have different roles. So PR and internal communications and writing, thought leadership. So that's just been really, really fun.
Amazing. And how can people follow your work?
Sure. You can find me, Lori Sussle Bonanni, on LinkedIn. You can also follow Elssus, Elssus, has a LinkedIn page, and I post content about communicating effectively. And if you reach out to me on LinkedIn, just let me know that you've seen me here.
Oh, great. All right. Okay, that is it for this week's Ceiling Shattering Tactics. If you would like more insight into the toolboxes of influential female leaders such as Lori, follow Mind the Ceiling on social media and get the latest updates. All right. See everybody next week.